911, what's your emergency? The caller's voice shakes with terror. There's been an incident at SeaWorld Orlando. A trainer. She's been attacked by one of the orcas. She's underwater and, oh God, there's so much blood in the water. What you're about to hear is the devastating true story of Dawn Brancho, a woman whose lifelong passion for marine life led her to the most dangerous job on Earth, and ultimately to her tragic death. This is part of our Animal Reckoning series, where we expose the horrifying truth behind what happens when we ignore the warning signs. And trust me, there were warning signs everywhere. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Dawn's story isn't just a tragic accident. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when love for animals collides with a system that profits from their captivity. Dawn. Marie Laverty wasn't just another animal lover. From the moment she could walk, this girl was obsessed with marine life in a way that honestly gave her parents chills. While other kids were playing with dolls, Dawn was reading marine biology textbooks and memorizing whale migration patterns. By age 9, she was already volunteering at local aquariums, showing a level of dedication that made grown adults uncomfortable. Her teachers called her gifted, but Dawn's obsession ran deeper than intelligence. She had this almost supernatural ability to connect with marine animals, like she could read their minds. Fast forward to college, and Dawn wasn't messing around. She graduated with honors from the University of South Carolina with a biology degree, specializing in marine behavior. But here's where it gets interesting. While other students were partying, Dawn was studying video footage of orca interactions for hours, taking notes on subtle behavioral cues that even experienced trainers missed. Her professors were stunned. This woman could predict an orca's mood better than people who'd worked with them for decades. When SeaWorld Orlando came calling, Dawn didn't just get the job, she dominated it. Within months, she went from rookie trainer to trusted orca handler, which is basically like going from driving school to Formula One racing. Visitors would specifically request shows where Dawn performed because there was something magical about watching her work. She didn't just train these massive predators. She formed genuine emotional bonds with them. Dawn believed in coexistence over dominance, treating these orcas as intelligent partners rather than performing slaves. Little did she know, this philosophy would put her directly in harm's way. Now let's talk about SeaWorld Orlando, the stage where this nightmare would unfold. This place wasn't just an aquarium. It was an entertainment empire built on the backs of captured ocean predators. The Shamu Show was their crown jewel, featuring elaborate choreography between humans and 6-ton killing machines in artificially engineered pools. But here's what they didn't advertise. These orcas were captured as babies from the wild, torn from their families, and forced into a life of performing tricks for fish treats. The psychological damage was invisible to tourists, but marine biologists were sounding alarms for decades. And then there was Tilikum, the star of our horror story, and quite possibly the most dangerous animal in captivity. Picture this, a 12,000-pound, 22-foot-long apex predator who'd spent over 20 years in concrete tanks after being captured as a calf off the coast of Iceland. But Tilikum wasn't just any orca. He was a killer with a documented history. This animal had already been involved in 2 human deaths, one in 1991 and another in 1999. Let me repeat that. SeaWorld knew they had a killer whale who had actually killed people, and they kept using him in shows with trainers. Marine biologists tried to warn everyone. Dr. Elaine Satterfield famously described keeping orcas in captivity as putting a brilliant mind in a box, and she wasn't exaggerating. These animals have complex social structures, travel hundreds of miles daily in the wild, and possess emotional intelligence that rivals humans. Locking them in small pools is like psychological torture. Tilikum showed all the signs: listlessness, reduced responsiveness, and increased jaw popping, which is basically an orca's way of saying, "I'm about to lose it." February 24th, 2010 started like any other day at SeaWorld. Dawn arrived early, ran through her standard pre-show checklist and PR, prepared for the 2 p.m. Dine with Shamu show. But something was different about Tilikum that day. Dawn noticed it. She always noticed. But her years of building trust with these animals made her confident she could handle whatever mood he was in. This confidence would prove fatal. The show began normally, but witnesses later reported that Tilikum seemed agitated from the start. There were hesitations during routines, aggressive tail slaps that were harder than usual, and a general tension in the water that made some spectators uncomfortable. But Dawn pushed forward, trusting in the relationship she'd built with this massive predator over years of interaction. Then came the moment that changed everything. Dawn was performing a close contact maneuver on a submerged platform when Tilikum's behavior shifted instantly. 1 second, he was following commands. The next, he grabbed Dawn and pulled her underwater in front of horrified tourists. Witnesses described seeing Dawn's ponytail floating on the surface before she disappeared beneath 6 tons of furious whale. What happened next was 7 minutes of pure terror. Emergency protocols kicked in immediately. Staff activated underwater tone generators designed to distract Tilikum, threw nets and barriers into the water, and tried everything they could think of to separate the whale from Dawn. But Tilikum was too smart, too strong, and too determined. He evaded every rescue attempt while continuing his brutal attack on Dawn beneath the surface. The official time of death was 2:41 p.m., but Dawn had been fighting for her life for 7 agonizing minutes before that. The autopsy would later reveal the horrifying extent of her injuries, drowning combined with severe internal trauma that painted a picture of unimaginable violence. This wasn't a quick accident. This was a prolonged, deliberate attack by an animal that had finally reached his breaking point. SeaWorld's response was immediate damage control. Shows were canceled, the media received carefully crafted statements about cooperation with authorities, and the company went into full defensive mode. But the investigation that followed exposed decades of ignored warnings, covered-up incidents, and a corporate culture that prioritized profits over safety. Former trainers came forward with stories of near misses, documented aggressive behavior, and internal reports that painted a picture of an industry in denial about the dangers they were exposing their employees to. The scientific community finally had the platform they needed to speak truth to power. Marine biologists who'd been warning about the psychological costs of orca captivity for decades suddenly found themselves in the spotlight, explaining how these intelligent creatures develop abnormal behaviors when confined. Dawn's death wasn't random. It was the inevitable result of treating sentient beings like entertainment props. Dawn's family channeled their grief into action, establishing the Dawn Brancho Foundation to support marine mammal research and wildlife stewardship. Her death became a catalyst for industry-wide changes, including the complete suspension of in-water performances and new safety protocols that acknowledged what experts had been saying all along. These animals are too dangerous and too intelligent to be kept in captivity for entertainment. But here's the thing that haunts me about Dawn's story. She loved these animals more than her own safety, and that love was used against her by a system that profits from animal captivity. Dawn believed she was forming genuine connections with these orcas, and maybe she was. But love isn't enough when you're dealing with traumatized predators who've been psychologically broken by decades in concrete boxes. Dawn Brancho died doing what she loved, but she also died because an industry ignored warning signs, covered up dangerous incidents, and prioritized entertainment over the welfare of both animals and humans. Her story isn't just about one tragic day. It's about what happens when we convince ourselves that we can control nature, that we can force wild predators to be our friends, and that profit is more important than the psychological well-being of some of the most intelligent creatures on Earth. Every time you see a marine mammal show, remember Dawn Brancho. Remember that behind every performance is a story of capture, confinement, and psychological trauma. Some stories end in applause, but some stories end in silence, blood in the water, and a brilliant woman's dream becoming her nightmare.